Hi everyone, it's Danny. Okay, so today we'll discuss about how to care for the wonderful little orchid Dendrobium Berry Oda. Now I think this is a very easy to care for orchid, and I think it's suitable for beginners who just want to experiment a different orchid other than your usual Phalaenopsis orchid. This dendrobium is a cross between the Dendrobium Kingianum and the Dendrobium biggibum. Now we all know how fussy the Kingianum can be and how hard it is to rebloom sometimes. But luckily, this cross is actually very easy to rebloom because it has the biggibum in its parentage. Now for those of you who don't know, the biggibum dendrobium is usually called the Phalaenopsis dendrobium. Now that orchid doesn't have to do anything with the Phalaenopsis orchid. People just call it like that because the way they bloom is actually pretty similar. The Berry Oda dendrobium produces quite tall canes, but they're not as tall as to not have space for it in your orchid collection. It does resemble the Kingianum dendrobium, but the canes are longer than the Kingianum. Also, as you can see here, the base of the cane is bare, but at the top it can produce 3 or 4 leaves. Flowers sprout from on top of the cane or from one of the nodes on the sides. You can have multiple flower spikes or you can have just one. It depends on the care this orchid received. This orchid can produce flower spikes from the new canes that just matured as well as from the old canes, so it's never a good idea to remove or cut the old canes if they are still alive, because they can bloom again and again for you for quite a few years. Now let's talk about the conditions that this orchid requires. As far as light goes, it really likes bright light. You don't have to provide direct sunshine all day long, especially in the summertime when the sun is very hot. But the brightest light you can provide is going to be beneficial for this orchid. If you cannot provide bright light, most probably it will not bloom for you. This orchid is tolerant to extreme temperatures. It can tolerate very high temperatures as well as very low temperatures, but it will be most happy in an intermediate temperature. So maybe 18 degrees during nighttime and 26 degrees during daytime is appropriate for this orchid. Now she really likes to dry out between waterings. For this reason, I suggest using a bark mix rather than sphagnum moss or anything else. It does enjoy watering regularly. When the media is dry, give it a good soak and it will be very, very happy. But it doesn't really need moist soil all the time. It likes to dry out. So if you can provide a few ventilation holes in the pot as well as an airy mix, she will be absolutely happy. In the growing season, when small little shoots start to appear, you can water this orchid regularly, meaning that when you see that the media is dry, you can water this orchid and wait for the next time the media dries until you water it. At this time, you can start to fertilize it. Now, some people suggest that using a high nitrogen fertilizer can actually induce cakey production rather than flower spike production. What I usually do is provide a high nitrogen fertilizer in the first 2 weeks of springtime, but when summertime comes, I switch to a bloom booster and I keep fertilizing this orchid until autumn. Now usually in the autumn time, the new canes will be already mature, they will have grown all of their leaves. So at this point, I actually stop fertilizing altogether and start to reduce watering, leaving this orchid dry out quite a bit between waterings. Along with the temperature drop during nighttime, the orchid will be prompted into producing small little buds, which eventually will turn out to be flower spikes. Now, because this orchid is not as hard to rebloom as a Kingianum, the drop in temperature doesn't necessarily need to be very drastic. I actually kept this orchid at about 17 degrees during nighttime and possibly 23 degrees during daytime, and it only took about 2 weeks or 3 weeks for this orchid to start to produce a little nub. At this point, I still watered the orchid infrequently. I let it dry out in between waterings, but when I saw multiple buds forming, I started to increase watering regularly. As the flower spikes mature and start forming buds, you can increase watering until you reach your normal watering routine, meaning when this orchid is completely dry, give it a good soak, but still no fertilizing. Now the flowers are quite tiny, as you can see, but they are super pretty. The usual color you will find is this deep purple, but I did see Berry Oda dendrobiums with a lighter shade than this and also white. Other than these colors, there doesn't seem to be much variety, so if you're looking for an orange Berry Oda dendrobium, you'll most probably not find one. Now the flowers should last quite a long time, usually about 2 months. But I have to issue a warning here. If you keep this orchid while it's in bloom in a very cold room, you might have a lot of bud blast. And this is what actually happened to my dendrobium. I had a very cold season the past few weeks, and all of the flowers dropped prematurely. But now that the temperatures are again high, the flowers seem to last quite a bit on the flower spikes. They are also fragrant, which is a bonus. Now, it's a sort of a honey and floral scent at the same time, and it's not super intense. You can definitely feel it when you're around the orchid. But if you have this orchid in a small chamber, it will not give you a headache. It's not that type of heavy, intense fragrance. So if you have troubles with allergies, or you just cannot stand very strong scents, this is a very good orchid for you, because most probably it will not give you a headache. So to summarize, the Dendrobium Berry Oda loves bright light any time of the year. It also likes to dry out between waterings and likes to have a very airy mix. Fertilizing should be done from the spring when the new canes start to emerge until autumn when the new canes are already mature. Then it needs a slight winter rest, not very dramatic, with a slight drop in temperature, and also no more fertilizing until new shoots start to appear. And that's about it on the Dendrobium Berry Oda. I think it's a quite easy to care for plant. It only needs bright light. Other than that, if you make some mistakes, it will probably be very forgiving and bounce back in no time. As a side note, my particular orchid didn't really have any good roots when I purchased it, and all the old roots are actually dead. But it did produce quite a lot of new roots which are healthy and are feeding the orchid. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's something I forgot to mention, just leave me a comment and I'll answer you. But please make sure in your G+ settings that people outside your circles can actually reply to you. So if you want to see more videos from me, just subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!